I was blackballed by my record companies. I was blackballed by many of the radio stations. And God gave me the victory over that by longevity, by being able to perform at any time.
Did you know Solomon Burke, the king of rock and soul, carried a heartbreaking secret to his grave? How could a man with so much talent and success have such a heavy burden?
People have called me conceited, big-headed, stubborn, arrogant. It has not been easy.
What was this terrible secret he never fully shared with the world? Let's explore the life of this legendary singer and uncover the mystery behind his hidden pain.
I believe that I'm ministering in song, and I'm singing soul songs of deliverance and love and understanding and joy and peace and sometimes sorrow.
Born James Solomon MacDonald had a unique and inspiring childhood. Some sources say he was born in 1939 or 1940, but the exact year isn't clear. His mother, Josephine Moore, was a nurse, teacher, and singer, but Solomon didn't know his father, as he wasn't involved in his life.
I was born in the church, actually born in the church. Church was going on downstairs when I was born. Trombones and tubas was playing, and so I really didn't get a chance to really let anybody hear me cry. So ever since, I've been like the voice in the wilderness crying out.
From a young age, Solomon was influenced by his grandmother, Eleanor Moore. She was a big spiritual and musical guide for him. She ran a church called Solomon's Temple at her home, where Solomon started preaching when he was just 7 years old. His grandmother made him practice listening to music on the radio, teaching him all kinds of music. Solomon's preaching style was very energetic, and he was so good that people started calling him the Boy Wonder Preacher. When Solomon was just 12 years old, he became the pastor of his grandmother's church. He was also on the radio, mixing music and preaching on shows in Philadelphia. He traveled around to different states, spreading his church's message and building his reputation. His grandmother even made him a cape from his blankie that he wore on Sundays. Solomon loved the idea of being a powerful figure, and the cape gave him a royal-like appearance. Growing up, Solomon had 6 younger siblings, including 5 brothers and a sister. To help his family, Solomon worked from a very young age. He delivered groceries with a little wagon, sold newspapers, and even started a car wash. His first business was a 99-cent car wash, where he and his friends worked hard to wash cars in 20 minutes. Solomon also worked as a hot dog seller at Eddie's Meat Market, where he met a future famous person, Chubby Checker. While still in high school, Solomon formed a gospel singing group called the Gospel Cavaliers. His grandmother gave him his first guitar, and he wrote his first song, Christmas Presents. The group performed in churches, but they eventually broke up. Solomon then entered a talent contest at the Cornerstone Baptist Church, where he won the competition and earned attention from several record labels. Solomon signed with Apollo Records, and his career started to take off. But there was a little trick played by his manager, Kay Williams. He added 4 years to Solomon's age to help him get noticed in the industry. This mix-up led to some confusion in the press, but it didn't stop Solomon from becoming one of the most influential figures in gospel and soul music.
In the early 60s, it was very complicating for me being the type of entertainer that I was, singing soul music, not accepting the title of an R&B singer, being rebellious towards the disc jockeys and towards the many people in my record companies who wanted me to continue to be a R&B singer.
Apollo Records hoped to make Burke as famous as Harry Belafonte, who was a big star at the time. During his time at Apollo, Burke recorded 9 songs. His first single, Christmas Presents, came out on Christmas Eve in 1955.
What a Christmas present.
Other songs included I'm in Love,
I'm in love,
I'm All Alone,
Lord I pray, night and day,
and No Man Walks Alone.
no man walks alone.
Though these songs didn't sell well, they showed his potential. In fact, his self-titled album, Solomon Burke, was re-released in 1964 after he became more famous. One of his notable songs was You Can Run, But You Can't Hide, which Burke co-wrote with Charles Marenstein.
Can't hide from him.
The title of the song was inspired by a famous quote from boxing legend Joe Louis, who even helped promote it. This led to Burke appearing on the popular Steve Allen Show in 1957, which gave him some recognition. But not everything was smooth sailing. His manager at the time tried to control him, saying, "I made you and I can break you." When Solomon didn't follow the manager's rules, the manager tried to bring him down. But Solomon didn't give up. He believed God had a plan for him and trusted that everything would work out. After this, he was dropped by Apollo Records. Burke believed that Williams blackballed him in the music industry, making it hard for him to get new recording opportunities or perform in clubs.
I was blackballed by my record companies. I was blackballed by many of the radio stations. And God gave me the victory over that by longevity, by being able to perform at any time, anywhere, for thousands and millions of people of all races, creeds, and colors.
Without a stable career, Burke faced tough times. He couldn't find steady work and even had a falling out with his mother, which left him homeless.
People have called me conceited, big-headed, stubborn, arrogant. It has not been easy.
Solomon often said that God calls people in different ways. For him, it was clear from the beginning. Even as a baby, he felt he was different. He knew he was chosen for something special. His faith kept him going through hard times, and he always trusted that God had bigger plans for him. Solomon's life wasn't just about music or preaching. It was about using his gifts to inspire others. Whether he was singing or talking, his energy and passion brought people together. He believed that everyone has a unique purpose, and that when God calls you, you just know. Now, Burke had a moment that changed his career forever. It all started with a man named Marvin Leonard "Babe" Chivian. Chivian was a body and fender man, which means he worked on car repairs, and he was also a real estate speculator. One day, he had an idea that would bring Burke into the music world in a big way. Chivian wanted Burke to sign a management contract with him, but instead of just asking him, he decided to play a trick. He took a shiny red Lincoln Continental Convertible, put it in front of Burke's mortuary, where Burke worked at the time, and left it there with a note attached. The note said, "Mr. Solomon, you can move this car and keep it. All I want you to do is record music." Now imagine this. There's a big red car right in front of the mortuary, and no one could move it. The police wouldn't touch it, and it was causing a lot of trouble. Burke's family was getting worried and told him to get the car moved because it was just sitting there, causing a lot of attention. Burke called Chivian and said, "You have to move this car. What's going on?" Chivian responded saying, "I'll move it, but you need to promise me you'll record music. No papers, just a handshake agreement." Burke agreed to the deal. He moved the car, and in return, he signed the management contract. A few months later, Burke found himself recording for Atlantic Records, a big name in the music world. This simple yet bold move by Chivian helped launch Burke's career to new heights, turning him into one of the most successful soul singers of his time.
Through the power of God, not me, but through the power of God and the people, the little people out there, are the ones that have kept Solomon Burke alive.
Burke had a big challenge in his early career. One of the big problems came when he released a song called "Just Out of Reach of My Two Empty Arms." Unfortunately, it didn't do as well as expected. People didn't like it as much as they should have.
Dreams that just won't let me be.
Then a man named Jerry Wexler from Atlantic Records gave him some country songs. Solomon didn't like this idea at first. He thought his manager was trying to push him away. The real problem was that Solomon was also a leader in his church, and being called a rhythm and blues singer wasn't going to work for him. At that time, the church was very strict. Solomon was an elder, and his church didn't want their leader being known as someone who sings rhythm and blues. They believed it wasn't proper. Solomon had to convince the record company to find a different label for him. He couldn't be called a rhythm and blues singer because of his church and his position as a bishop. After thinking about it, they came up with the term soul singer. This worked perfectly because it didn't sound too bad for the church members. In fact, they loved it because being a soul singer was seen as saving souls, which was a good thing in their eyes.
Was singing soul music, not accepting the title of an R&B singer, being rebelliant towards the disc jockeys and towards the many people in my record companies who wanted me to continue to be a R&B singer, And I kept pressing the word soul music.
This is how Solomon Burke became known as the King of Soul, and how the term soul music started to grow in the music industry. In 1961, this new title helped shape a whole new genre of music that we know today as soul. It was the beginning of something huge, and Solomon Burke played a big part in it. And here's something even more interesting. Jerry loved Solomon Burke. He loved everything about him, his sound, his energy, his performance. Solomon didn't just perform for his audience, he treated his shows like a church revival. He would hold the microphone, sing with all his might, and get the crowd so excited that they'd start running down the aisles like they were getting saved. Wexler was amazed by how Solomon brought that same passion to both his music and his stage presence. Now let's talk about some drama between Burke, the king of rock and soul,
Yeah, just out of reach.
and James Brown, the godfather of soul. Their feud wasn't hidden. They both had a little competition going on. When Solomon Burke performed, he would wear a cape, just like James Brown. The two were often compared because they had similar stage performances. But Solomon was a little heavier than James, so he couldn't do all the moves James did, like falling to his knees or dancing around the stage. James Brown was known for being very athletic and doing all these crazy moves in his performances, which made his shows more energetic. But Solomon, even though he couldn't do all of that, still had something special about him. Solomon Burke was actually crowned the King of Rock and Soul by a popular radio station. And it wasn't just a title given out on the radio, it was a big deal. They even held a coronation for him. Solomon performed 5 nights in a row, and every night someone would walk out with a crown and robe, making a big show of it. It was a clear message that Solomon was seen as the king, but James Brown didn't like that at all. He was upset and felt that he deserved the title of king. When his song "Papa's Got a Brand New Bag" became a huge hit, he thought that proved he was the one who should have been crowned. James started calling up the radio station, saying that he had sold more records than Solomon Burke and put on a better show. He wanted the title so badly, but it was clear that there was only room for one king. Solomon Burke made sure to let the world know exactly how he felt about James Brown. In an interview, Burke didn't hold back. He called out James Brown, saying things that made it clear their rivalry was deep. Burke said James Brown wouldn't come near him, whether it was on or off stage. He even questioned James Brown's success, saying that Brown claimed to sell many records in Britain, but wasn't really doing well there or in America. Burke even threw in a funny jab about boxing. He said Brown supported Sonny Liston in a big fight and blamed Liston's loss on training to Brown's song, "Night Train." According to Burke, listening to that song was a mistake. Burke also criticized how James Brown treated his group, the Famous Flames. He claimed that Brown no longer cared about them and just kept them around for luck. Burke said James Brown had changed from being a humble, hard-working artist to someone who was hard to deal with. Burke shared a story about being cut from one of James Brown's shows. He had planned to sing 6 songs, but Brown only let him perform 1 short song. Burke said this was just one example of Brown being disrespectful. Also in the music world, fans often talked about the 3 Bs, Burke, Brown, and Bland, Bobby Blue Bland. But Burke didn't like that. He said, "It's not Burke, Brown, and Bland. It's just Burke and Bland, or Bland and Burke." Even though Burke had strong opinions about Brown, he admitted that Brown was a great performer. James Brown was already becoming a legend in R&B. People admired his talent and energy on stage. But like any star, opinions about him varied. The real story of this feud might never be fully known. Was Burke just speaking his truth, or was there more to the rivalry than he let on? Whatever the case, the tension between these two giants added another layer to their legacy in the music world. Let's talk about his personal life.
And I love people. And I try to express that because, God is love. And the more love you give, the more love you get back.
So when it comes to charming women, people said he had a way with words that made women fall for him. Not only did he have the charm to win them over, but he also had the ability to make them feel things they'd never felt before. What's even more surprising is that this wasn't just something that happened later in his life. This started when he was just 14 years old. At such a young age, Solomon became a father to his first child. And as he grew older, things only got crazier. When he signed with Apollo Records, they raised his age by 4 years, claiming he was 19. This meant that some of the women he was with didn't even know they were sleeping with a teenager. But Solomon was so smooth that it didn't matter. One story that really shows just how persuasive he was comes from a time when he was hit by a car. The woman who was driving the car, a woman named Ohella Thompson, ended up taking him home with her after the accident. Now, we're not sure if they had any romantic relationship, but Solomon's way with words was so powerful that he managed to talk himself into living with her. Then one day, when Solomon came home to Ohella's house, he was shocked to meet her niece, Dolores. She completely stole his heart, and soon after they got married and had 7 children together. But Dolores eventually found out that Solomon had been married before to a woman named Doris P. Williams. They were only married for 2 months, but they had a baby girl together. This was a big surprise for Dolores, but she decided to move forward. However, there was something else Dolores had to deal with. Solomon's cheating. He wasn't just faithful to her, he had many women, and his disrespect for Dolores eventually led to their separation. After that, Solomon married Bernadine, but their marriage didn't last either. He wasn't someone who went through divorces easily.
I don't drink, don't smoke, don't believe and use drugs. And I do have 21 children, so I believe in God's love.
Burke was married 4 times, and each marriage came with its own drama and challenges. One of the biggest things people talk about when it comes to him is his many children. It's said that he had 21 kids. And here's the shocking part. Most of them didn't come from his wives. Instead, they came from other women he had relationships with over the years. Let's dive into some of the stories about his life, especially with women. One woman who had a story to share about Solomon was Betty Levette. Betty was a singer, and she met Solomon when they were both signed to Atlantic Records. He asked her to join him on tour, but what happened behind the scenes was far from normal. If she was going to tour with him, she had to sleep with him every night. She didn't mind at first, but as time went on, she grew tired of it. She wanted something more than just a one-sided relationship with him. She even had a boyfriend at the time. One night after a show, Betty had her boyfriend sneak into her hotel room. When Solomon knocked on the door, Betty didn't answer, hoping he wouldn't catch on. They heard him walking down the hallway, so Betty and her boyfriend started laughing. After he left, they spent the night together. The next morning, she sneaked her boyfriend out, but Solomon was furious. He had found out about Betty's secret night with her boyfriend. And even worse, he hadn't paid her for her work on the tour yet. After everything she had done, Solomon just left with his entourage, leaving Betty behind in the city. She was stranded and had to figure out how to get home without any money. But Betty Levette's story isn't the only one. Another woman, whose niece shared the gossip, claimed that Solomon Burke had a secret fetish. It's said that he didn't just like sex, but he liked to get women pregnant. It seems that Solomon wasn't just about fun and games. He wanted to leave a legacy, and that meant having lots of children.
Don't you feel like crying?
One thing people always noticed about Solomon was how much he loved food. He ate like there was no tomorrow, like he couldn't get enough of it. People would joke that he ate like a vacuum cleaner, just sucking up food as fast as he could. It wasn't just about eating for him, though. Food seemed to make him happy. But what was even stranger was how he would sometimes compare women to food. It was said that he would look at women and say things like, "She looks like a big, juicy steak." This was one of the ways he made women feel uncomfortable. The rumors didn't stop there. There were also claims that Solomon often had multiple women in his bed at once. He would wake up in the morning and admire all the beautiful women around him. But despite his wild personal life, Solomon still had a church, and he was still a pastor. This is where things get even stranger. It was said that while he was talking to women about God and his church, he would later take them to bed. One of the most surprising things about Solomon Burke was how he mixed his sexual energy with his church life. He had a special throne built for himself at the church. Every Sunday, he would sit on that throne, wearing a crown and looking like a king. This kingly image was part of his church life, but it was also connected to the rumors about his sexual behavior. Solomon once said, "A minister in bed is still a man." He claimed that no matter how holy he was in church, he still had the same feelings as any other man. He even joked about how his uncle, who was also a preacher, might have been doing something more than just praying for women. Solomon said his uncle would pray over a woman, and then 9 months later, a baby would be born. This was another story that added to the strange mix of Solomon's church and personal life. Despite all the rumors and stories, it's important to remember that these are just rumors. No one can say for sure what really happened.
I've learned and I've lived, and as long as you live, you learn. And as long as God gives you life, where there's another day, there's another way.
One of his biggest achievements came in 2003 when he won a Grammy for his album, Don't Give Up on Me. This was a big moment in his career, showing that his music still touched people even after so many years. His career didn't stop there. In 2010, Solomon released his final album, which was well received by fans and critics alike. But things took a turn in the mid-2000s. Around 2006, Solomon's health began to decline. His weight had always been an issue, and by this time, it was causing him serious problems. He was diagnosed with arthritis and had to use a wheelchair. Despite his health struggles, he didn't slow down. Instead of taking time to relax and enjoy his last years with his wife, Frances, Solomon hired a nurse to take care of him at home. Sadly, on October 10, 2010, Solomon Burke passed away. He was on a plane that had just landed when he died. It was reported that he died of natural causes due to old age, as well as his struggles with being severely overweight. At the time of his death, Solomon was believed to be around 70 or 74 years old, although there was some confusion about his exact age.